This is David with ISO Horns, and today I want to talk about multi-user MIMO WISP radios and horn arrays. Yesterday on WISP Talk, Micah posted this picture and this description where he says RFE 4x4 horns and Cambium 4500C radios and Tarana 3 gigahertz. Tower is getting a complete overhaul. The noise cancellation on the horns and the radios surpassed my expectations. So he doesn't say how they performed. He doesn't say what his expectations were. He's not doing a comparison test. He's simply saying that his expectations were surpassed. He says better than expected results for the last few months of testing. So it looks like this equipment is new out of the box. You can still see the rubber caps on the RPSMA connectors here. So he's got another test bed where he's been doing months of testing, and this equipment has performed well in his test environment. And now he's about to deploy this equipment in production based on the results of those tests. He gets lots of likes. He gets 18 comments. Tazos from RF Elements says, these sure look much better in the field versus on a desk. I agree. They'll look even better when they're on top of the tower, providing real value to real customers. 5 gigahertz still has a place. Love it. I agree that 5 gigahertz still has a place. But the question is, how does the new 5 gigahertz gear compare with the old 5 gigahertz gear? And that question is not being answered. So while 5 gigahertz may still have a place, does this gear have a place? And I want to know, how does an 8x8 radio compare with a 2x2 radio at a fraction of the cost? And how does a 4x4 or 8x8 horn array compare with the single 2x2 horn? That's the question that I want to see asked and answered. And unfortunately, that's not allowed in this talk. What's allowed is cheerleading. You're allowed to take pictures of equipment about to go up into the air, but you're not allowed to question the value of it, or at least I'm not. Because I question the value of it. So Dwayne in the comments says, don't tell anyone about the horns. Per the expert, the 4x4 horns don't work. Well, it's not that the 4x4 horns don't work. You'll definitely get a link. You can use them to provide value. It's just, is that any better value? Is there any value to a 4x4 horn array pointed in the same direction versus a single 2x2 horn? That's the big question. And this gets 14 likes and giggles. But it's misrepresenting what I think. So I know that you can get value from this. I'm just not sure that you can get the right value, the right return on investment compared to 2x2 horns and 2x2 radios. Dwayne says, love to see new wireless deployments. I agree with that. Fixed wireless, still connecting customers all over the world. When ISO Horns first got started, we sent our new 6 gigahertz 2x2 horns to customers all over the world for them to test side by side with their existing 5 gigahertz horns. And they could see that our 6 gigahertz horns will outperform RF Elements 5 gigahertz horns every time. And so they got to see the value, and they got to have true wideband, which means that they're going to have access to 6 gigahertz as well using our horns. We outperform in 5 gigahertz and we outperform in 6 gigahertz. So it's worth noticing here, this gets 14 likes. Who else doesn't think horns work as expected? Well, the last good comparison test in WISP Talk was also from Dwayne Zimmerman, where he tested our 0.6 meter dish with the RF Elements 0.6 meter dish, the Ultra Dish 29 WB, supposed wideband. And he found that our dish outperformed RF Elements by about 15% in downlink capacity as measured with Ookla speed test. And somebody asked, well, what happens when you replace the other side of the link? So you've upgraded the station. What happens if you upgrade the antenna at the access point? And he says, well, we're waiting for the 6 gigahertz 4x4 sector from Link. I don't really think a bunch of 90-degree horns on a 4x4 radio works the way it's advertised. Well, the 4x4, the 90-degree horns on the 4x4 radio definitely works the way it's advertised when it's advertised by ISO horns. We have a 4x4 for this Cambium radio, and we advertise it as a 4x4. We don't advertise it as multi-user MIMO. The sector antenna from Cambium Networks, they don't tell you what the VSWR is of their sector antenna. And the only reason why Cambium would not disclose the VSWR for the antenna is because the VSWR is bad. And a poor VSWR value is going to impact the results of a test. And so he tested with the Cambium networks on one side and the ISO horns on the other. If he upgraded the sector to an ISO horns, he would get better performance. Also, upgrading to the Link Q is likely to provide better performance. But it's a narrow band 4x4 sector. And the 4x4 from Link Q isn't necessarily going to perform any better than the 2x2 from ISO horns or the 2x2 or the 4x4 from ISO horns. But it's just worth noticing that Dwayne says he doesn't think that the 90-degree horns and the 4x4 radios work the way they're advertised. But here, he seems to be putting it on me, as if I'm the bad guy for saying that the 4x4 horns don't work. I like this version of Dwayne a lot better than this version of Dwayne. But notice that this one gets 14 likes and giggles, and this one is largely ignored. This shows that what's allowed in Wisp Talk is cheap comments and saying what everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear that RF Elements makes good antennas and they provide value and they perform as advertised. Nobody wants to hear that they don't. And that's why I'm not allowed to comment in Wisp Talk. It's why Dwayne's comment saying this gets no likes, whereas Dwayne's comment here gets lots of likes. Another example of this is this comment here. So he says, Matthew says, how does this $100,000 plus investment get paid back? Is this upgrade to keep existing customers and cash flow, or market to new potential customers that you couldn't get with the previous gear? No answers, no likes. But this is the important question. It's not whether or not this can provide value. We all know that it's possible to connect customers on this equipment and get payback over time. The question is, how does this equipment compare to previous generation equipment? And is it worth upgrading previous generation equipment, or is it worth the added price tag of this equipment versus others? The other thing that's missing here is, did this Wisp get free gear in exchange for posting this to Wisp Talk? Did this Wisp get a discount on this gear? What was the price that this Wisp paid? And we don't know that. We don't know if this is a good value because we don't know what this person paid. And we also don't have any idea um, how many subscribers are going to be connected, what what the Wisp is going to be able to charge for the services connected to this gear. So it's just worth noticing what's allowed is banal cheerleading, boring comments. What's not allowed is questions, meaningful comparison tests. And that's why I started Wisp Group 2.0, not just because I wasn't allowed to comment in Wisp Talk. I stopped commenting in Wisp Talk long before I got banned. Um, when I noticed that only certain types of comments were allowed and that the quality of the conversations had diminished a lot in that group. And I'm hoping that more people will post meaningful tests, meaningful results, meaningful posts. And that stands as a contrast to what is allowed and encouraged in Wisp Talk. Thanks for watching.